8. Then Judas Maccabeus and they that were with him went privily into the towns, and called the king's folks together, and took unto them all such as continued in the Jews' religion, and assembled about 6,000 men. And they called upon the Lord that he would look upon the people that was trodden down of all, and also pity the temple profaned of ungodly men, and that he would have compassion upon the city, sore defaced, and ready to be made even with the ground, and hear the blood that cried unto him, and remember the wicked slaughter of harmless infants, and the blasphemies committed against his name, and that he would shew his hatred against the wicked. Now when Maccabeus had his company about him, he could not be withstood by the heathen, for the wrath of the Lord was turned into mercy. Therefore he came at unawares, and burnt up towns and cities, and got into his hands the most commodious places, and overcame, and put to flight no small number of his enemies. But specially took he advantage of the night for such privy attempts, insomuch that the fruit of his holiness was spread everywhere. So when Philip saw that this man increased by little and little, and that things prospered with him still more and more, he wrote unto Ptolemaeus, the governor of Celesyria, and Phoenix, to yield more aid to the king's affairs. Then forthwith, choosing Nicanor the son of Patroclus, one of his special friends, he sent him with no fewer than 20,000 of all nations under him, to root out the whole generation of the Jews. And with him he joined also Gorgias as a captain, who in matters of war had great experience. So Nicanor undertook to make so much money of the captive Jews as should defray the tribute of 2,000 talents, which the king was to pay to the Romans. Wherefore immediately he sent to the cities upon the sea coast, proclaiming a sale of the captive Jews, and promising that they should have 80 bodies for 1 talent, not expecting the vengeance that was to follow upon him from the Almighty God. Now when the word was brought unto Judas of Nicanor's coming, and he had imparted unto those that were with him that the army was at hand, they that were fearful and distrusted the justice of God fled and conveyed themselves away. Others sold all that they had left, and withal besought the Lord to deliver them, sold by the wicked Nicanor, before they met together. And if not for their own sakes, yet for the covenants they had made with their fathers, and for his holy and glorious name's sake, by which they were called. So Maccabeus called his men together unto the number of 6,000, and exhorted them not to be stricken with terror of the enemy, nor to fear the great multitude of the heathen, who came wrongly against them, but to fight manfully, and to set before their eyes the injury that they had unjustly done to the holy place, and the cruel handling of the city, whereof they made a mockery, and also the taking away of the government of their forefathers. For they, said he, trust in their weapons and boldness, but our confidence is in the Almighty, who at a beck can cast down both them that come against us, and also all the world. Moreover he recounted unto them what helps their forefathers had found, and how they were delivered when under Sennacherib 180, and 5,000 perished. And he told them of the battle that they had in Babylon with the Galatians, how they came but 8,000 in all to the business, with 4,000 Macedonians, and that the Macedonians being perplexed, the 8,000 destroyed in 120,000, because of the help that they had from heaven, and so received a great booty. Thus when he had made them bold with these words, and ready to die for the law and the country, he divided his army into 4 parts, and joined with himself his own brethren, leaders of each band, to wit Simon and Joseph and Jonathan, giving each one 1,500 men. Also he appointed Eleazar to read the holy book, and when he had given them this watchword, the help of God, himself leading the first band, and by the help of the Almighty they slew above 9,000 of their enemies, and wounded and maimed the most part of Nicanor's host, and so put all to flight, and took their money that came to buy them, and pursued them far, but lacking time they returned. For it was the day before the Sabbath, and therefore they would no longer pursue them. So when they had gathered their armor together, and spoiled their enemies, they occupied themselves above the Sabbath, yielding exceeding praise and thanks to the Lord, who had preserved them unto that day, which was the beginning of mercy, distilling upon them. And after the Sabbath, when they had given part of the spoils to the maimed, and the widows and orphans, the residue, they divided among themselves and their servants. When this was done, and they had made a common supplication, they besought the merciful Lord to be reconciled with his servants forever. Moreover, of those that were with Timotheus and Bacchides, who fought against them, they slew above 20,000, and very easily got high and strongholds, and divided among themselves many spoils more, and made the maimed, orphans, widows, yea, and the aged also equal in spoils with themselves. And when they had gathered their armor together, they laid them up all carefully in convenient places, and the remnant of the spoils they brought to Jerusalem. They slew also Pilarchus, that wicked person, who was with Timotheus, and had annoyed the Jews many ways. Furthermore, at such time as they kept the feast for the victory in their country, they burnt Callisthenes, that had set fire upon the holy gates, who had fled into a little house, and so he received the reward meet for his wickedness. As for that most ungracious Nicanor, who had brought 1,000 merchants to buy the Jews, he was through the help of the Lord brought down by them, of whom he made least account, and putting off his glorious apparel, and discharging his company, he came like a fugitive servant through the midland unto Antioch, having very great dishonour, for that his host was destroyed. Thus he that took upon him to make good to the Romans their tribute by means of captives in Jerusalem, told abroad that the Jews had God to fight for them, and therefore they could not be hurt, because they followed the laws that he gave them. 9. About that time came Antiochus with dishonour out of the country of Persia, for he had entered the city called Persepolis, and went about to rob the temple, and to hold the city. Whereupon the multitude, running to defend themselves with their weapons, put them to flight. And so it happened that Antiochus, being put to flight, of the inhabitants returned with shame. Now when he came to Ecbatane, news was brought him what had happened unto Nicanor and Timotheus. Then swelling with anger, he thought to avenge upon the Jews the disgrace done unto him by those that made him flee. Therefore commanded he his chariotmen to drive without ceasing, and to dispatch the journey, the judgment of God now following him. For he had spoken proudly in this sort, that he would come to Jerusalem, and make it a common burying place of the Jews. But the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, smote him with an incurable and invisible plague. Or as soon as he had spoken these words, a pain of the bowels that was remediless came upon him, and sore torments of the inner parts, and that most justly, for he had tormented other men's bowels with many and strange torments. Howbeit he nothing at all ceased from his bragging, but still was filled with pride, breathing out fire in his rage against the Jews, and commanding to haste the journey. But it came to pass that he fell down from his chariot, carried violently, so that having a sore fall, all the members of his body were much pained. And thus he that a little afore thought he might command the waves of the sea, so proud was he beyond the condition of man, and weighed the high mountains in a balance, was now cast on the ground, and carried in an horse litter, shewing forth unto all the manifest power of God, so that the worms rose up out of the body of this wicked man, and whilst he lived in sorrow and pain, his flesh fell away, and the filthiness of his smell was noisome to all his army. And the man that thought a little afore he could reach to the stars of heaven, no man could endure to carry for his intolerable stink. Here therefore, being plagued, he began to leave off his great pride, and to come to the knowledge of himself by the scourge of God, his pain increasing every moment. And when he himself could not abide his own smell, he said these words, It is meet to be subject unto God, and that a man that is mortal should not proudly think of himself if he were God. This wicked person vowed also unto the Lord, who now no more would have mercy upon him, saying thus, that the holy city, to the which he was going in haste to lay it even with the ground, and to make it a common burying place, he would set at liberty. And as touching the Jews, whom he had judged not worthy so much as to be buried, but to be cast out with their children to be devoured of the fowls and wild beasts, he would make them all equals to the citizens of Athens. And the holy temple which before he had spoiled, he would garnish with goodly gifts, and restore all the holy vessels with many more, and out of his own revenue defray the charges belonging to the sacrifices. Yea, and that also he would become a Jew himself, and go through all the world that was inhabited, and declare the power of God. But for all this his pains would not cease, for the just judgment of God was come upon him. Therefore, despairing of his health, he wrote unto the Jews the letter underwritten, containing the form of his supplication after this manner. Antiochus, king and governor, to the good Jews his citizens, wisheth much joy, health, and prosperity. If ye and your children fare well, and your affairs be to your contentment, I give very great thanks to God, having my hope in heaven. As for me, I was weak, or else I would have remembered kindly your honor and goodwill returning out of Persia, and being taken with a grievous disease, I thought it necessary to care for the common safety of all, not distrusting mine health, but having great hope to escape this sickness, but considering that even my father at what time he led an army into the high countries, appointed a successor, to the end that if anything fell out contrary to expectation, or if any tidings were brought that were grievous, they of the land, knowing to whom the state was left, might not be troubled. Again, considering how that the princes that are borderers and neighbors unto my kingdom wait for opportunities, and expect what shall be the event, I have appointed my son Antiochus king, whom I often committed and commended unto many of you, when I went up into the high provinces, to whom I have written as follows. Therefore I pray and request you to remember the benefits that I have done unto you generally, and in special, and that every man will be still faithful to me and my son. For I am persuaded that he, understanding my mind, will favorably and graciously yield to your desires. Thus the murderer and blasphemer, having suffered most grievously, as he entreated other men, so died he a miserable death in a strange country in the mountains. And Philip that was brought up with him carried away his body, who also fearing the son of Antiochus went into Egypt to Ptolemy Philometor. 10. Now Maccabeus and his company, the Lord guiding them, recovered the temple and the city. But the altars which the heathen had built in the open street, and also the chapels, they pulled down. And having cleansed the temple, they made another altar, and striking stones they took fire out of them, and offered a sacrifice after 2 years, and set forth incense, and lights, and shewbread. When that was done, they fell flat down, and besought the Lord that they might come no more into such troubles, but if they sinned any more against him, that he himself would chasten them with mercy, and that they might not be delivered unto the blasphemous and barbarous nations. Now upon the same day that the strangers profaned the temple, on the very same day it was cleansed again, even the 25th day of the same month, which is Caslu. And they kept the 8 days with gladness, as in the feast of the tabernacles, remembering that not long afore they had held the feast of the tabernacles, when as they wandered in the mountains and danced like beasts. Therefore they bare branches, and fair boughs, and palms also, and sang psalms unto him that had given them good success in cleansing his place. They ordained also by a common statute and decree that every year those days should be kept of the whole nation of the Jews. And this was the end of Antiochus, called Epiphanes. Now will we declare the acts of Antiochus Eupator, who was the son of this wicked man, gathering briefly the calamities of the wars. So when he was come to the crown, he set one Lysias over the affairs of his realm, and appointed him his chief governor of Celesyria and Phoenice. For Ptolemy that was called Macron, choosing rather to do justice unto the Jews for the wrong that had been done unto them, endeavored to continue peace with them. Whereupon, being accused of the king's friends before Eupator, and called traitor at every word because he had left Cyprus, that Philometor had committed unto him, and departed to Antiochus Epiphanes, and seeing that he was in no honorable place, he was so discouraged that he poisoned himself and died. But when Gorgias was governor of the holds, he hired soldiers, and nourished war continually with the Jews. And therewithal the Idumeans, having gotten into their hands the most commodious holds, kept the Jews occupied, and receiving those that were banished from Jerusalem, they went about to nourish war. Then they that were with Maccabees made supplication, and besought God that he would be their helper, and so they ran with violence upon the strongholds of the Idumeans, and assaulting them strongly, they won the holds, and kept off all that fought upon the wall, and slew all that fell into their hands, and killed no fewer than 20,000. And because certain, who were no less than 9,000, were fled together into two very strong castles, having all manner of things convenient to sustain the siege, Maccabeus left Simon and Joseph, and Zacchaeus also, and them that were with him, who were enough to besiege them, and departed himself unto those places which more needed his help. Now they that were with Simon, being led with covetousness, were persuaded for money through certain of those that were in the castle, and took 70,000 drachms, and let some of them escape. But when it was told Maccabeus what was done, he called the governors of the people together, and accused those men that they had sold their brethren for money, and set their enemies free to fight against them. So he slew those that were found traitors, and immediately took the two castles. And having good success with his weapons in all things he took in hand, he slew in the two holds more than 20,000. Now Timotheus, whom the Jews had overcome before, when he had gathered a great multitude of foreign forces, and horses out of Asia not a few, came as though he would take Jewry by force of arms. But when he drew near, they that were with Maccabeus turned themselves to pray unto God, and sprinkled earth upon their heads, and girded their loins with sackcloth, and fell down at the foot of the altar, and besought him to be merciful to them, and to be an enemy to their enemies, and an adversary to their adversaries, as the law declareth. So after the prayer they took their weapons, and went on further from the city. And when they drew near to their enemies, they kept by themselves. Now the sun being newly risen, they joined both together, the one part having together with their virtue their refuge also unto the Lord for a pledge of their success and victory, the other side making the rage leader of their battle. But when the battle waxed strong, there appeared unto the enemies from heaven 5 comely men upon horses, with bridles of gold, and 2 of them led the Jews, and took Maccabeus betwixt them, and covered him on every side weapons, and kept him safe, but shot arrows and lightnings against the enemies, so that being confounded with blindness and full of trouble, they were killed. And there were slain of footmen 20,500, and 600 horsemen. As for Timotheus himself, he fled into a very stronghold called Gaura, where Tyrius was governor. But they that were with Maccabeus laid siege against the fortress courageously 4 days. And they that were within, trusting to the strength of the place, blasphemed exceedingly, and uttered wicked words. Nevertheless, upon the 5th day early 20 young men of Maccabeus' company, inflamed with anger because of the blasphemies, assaulted the wall manly, and with a fierce courage killed all that they met withal. Others likewise, ascending after them, whilst they were busied with them that were within, burnt the towers, and kindling fires burnt the blasphemers alive. And others broke open the gates, and having received in the rest of the army, took the city, and killed Timotheus, that was hid in a certain pit, and Tyrius his brother, with Apollophanes. When this was done, they praised the Lord with psalms and thanksgiving, who had done so great things for Israel, and given them the victory. 11. Not long after, Lysias, the king's protector and cousin, who also managed the affairs, took sore displeasure for the things that were done. And when he had gathered about 80,000 with all the horsemen, he came against the Jews, thinking to make the city a habitation of the Gentiles, and to make a gain of the temple, as of the other chapels of the heathen, and so set the high priesthood to sale every year, not all considering the power of God, but puffed up with his 10,000s of footmen, and his thousands of horsemen, and his 80 elephants. So he came to Judea, and drew near to Bethsura, which was a strong town, but distant from Jerusalem about 5 furlongs, and he laid sore siege unto it. Now when they that were with Maccabeus heard that he besieged the halls, they and all the people with lamentation and tears besought the Lord that he would send a good angel to deliver Israel. Then Maccabeus himself first then Maccabeus himself first of all took weapons, exhorting the other that they would jeopard themselves together with him to help their brethren. So they went forth together with a willing mind. And as they were at Jerusalem, there appeared before them on horseback one in white clothing, shaking his armour of gold. Then they praised the merciful God altogether, and took heart, insomuch that they were ready not only to fight with men, but with most cruel beasts, and to pierce through walls of iron. Thus they marched forward in their armour, having a helper from heaven, for the Lord was merciful unto them. And giving a charge upon their enemies like lions, they slew 11,000 footmen, and 1,600 horsemen, and put all the other to flight. Many of them also being wounded escaped naked, and Lysias himself fled away shamefully, and so escaped. Who, as he was a man of understanding, casting with himself what loss he had had, and considering that the Hebrews could not be overcome, because the Almighty God helped them, he sent unto them, and persuaded them to agree to all reasonable conditions, and promised that he would persuade the king that he must needs be a friend unto them. Then Maccabeus consented to all that Lysias desired, being careful of the common good, and whatsoever Maccabeus wrote unto Lysias concerning the Jews, the king granted it. For there were letters written unto the Jews from Lysias to this effect: Lysias unto the people of the Jews sendeth greeting. John and Absalom, who were sent from you, delivered me the petition subscribed, and made request for the performance of the contents thereof. Therefore what things soever were meet to be reported to the king, I have declared them, and he had granted as much as might be. And if then you will keep yourselves loyal to the state hereafter, also will I endeavor to be a means of your good. But of the particulars I have given order both to these and the other that came from me, to commune with you. Fare ye well. The 108th and 40th year, the 24th day of the month Dios Corinthius. Now the king's letter contained these words: King Antichus unto his brother Lysias sendeth greeting. Since our fathers translated unto the gods, our will is, that they that are in our realm live quietly, that every one may attend upon his own affairs. We understand also that the Jews would not consent to our father, for to be brought unto the custom of the Gentiles, but had rather keep their own manner of living, for the which cause they require of us, that we should suffer them to live after their own laws. Wherefore our mind is, that this nation shall be in rest, and we have determined to restore them their temple, that they may live according to the customs of their forefathers. Thou shalt do well therefore to send unto them, and grant them peace, that when they are certified of our mind, they may be of good comfort, and ever go cheerfully about their own affairs. And the letter of the king unto the nation of the Jews was after this manner: King Antichus sendeth greeting unto the council and the rest of the Jews. If ye fare well, we have our desire. We are also in good health. Menelaus declared unto us that your desire was to return home, and to follow your own business. Wherefore they that will depart shall have safe conduct till the 30th day of Santicus, with security. And the Jews shall use their own kind of meats and laws as before, and none of them any manner of ways shall be molested for things ignorantly done. I have sent also Menelaus that he may comfort you. Fare ye well in the 148th year, and the 15th day of the month Santicus. The Romans also sent unto them a letter containing these words: Quintus Memmius and Titus Manlius, ambassadors of the Romans, sent greeting unto the people of the Jews. Whatsoever Lysias, the king's cousin, hath granted, therewith we also are well pleased. But touching such things as we judge to be referred to the king, after ye have advised thereof, send one forthwith, that we may declare as it is convenient for you. For we are now going to Antioch. Therefore send some with speed, that we may know what is your mind. Farewell this 108th and 40th year, the 15th day of the month Santicus. 12. When these covenants were made, Lysias went unto the king, and the Jews were about their husbandry. But of the governors of several places, Timotheus and Apollonius the son of Genius, also Hieronymus and Demophon, and beside them Nicanor the governor of Cyprus, would not suffer them to be quiet and live in peace. The men of Joppa also did such an ungodly deed. they prayed the Jews that dwelt among them to go with their wives and children into the boats which they had prepared, as though they had meant them no hurt, who accepted of it according to the common decree of the city, as being desirous to live in peace, and suspecting nothing. But when they were gone forth into the deep, they drowned no less than 200 of them. When Judas heard of this cruelty done unto his countrymen, he commanded those that were with him to make them ready. And calling upon God the righteous judge, he came against those murderers of his brethren, and burnt the heaven by night, and set the boats on fire, and those that fled thither he slew. And when the town was shut up, he went backward as if he would return to root out all of them, the city of Joppa. But when he heard that the Jamnites were minded to do in like manner unto the Jews that dwelt among them, he came upon the Jamnites also by night, and set fire on the heaven and the navy, so that the light of the fire was seen at Jerusalem 240 furlongs off. Now when they were gone from thence 9 furlongs in their journey toward Timotheus, no fewer than 5,000 men on foot and 500 horsemen of the Arabians set upon him. Whereupon there was a very sore battle, but Judah's side by the help of God got the victory, so that the nomads of Arabia, being overcome, besought Judas for peace, promising both to give him cattle and to pleasure him otherwise. Then Judas, thinking indeed that they would be profitable in many things, granted them peace, whereupon they shook hands, and so they departed to their tents. He went also about to make a bridge to a certain strong city, which was fenced about with walls, and inhabited by people of divers countries, and the name of it was Caspis. But they that were within it put such trust in the strength of the walls and provision of victuals, that they behaved themselves rudely toward them that were with Judas, railing and blaspheming, and uttering such words as were not to be spoken. Wherefore Judas with his company, calling upon the great Lord of the world, who without rams or engines of war did cast down Jericho in the time of Joshua, gave a fierce assault against the walls, and took the city by the will of God, and made unspeakable slaughters, insomuch that a lake 2 furlongs broad near adjoining thereunto, being filled full, was seen running with blood. Then departed they from thence 750 furlongs, and came to Charaka unto the Jews that are called Tubini. But as for Timotheus, they found him not in the places, for before he had dispatched anything, he departed from thence, having left a very strong garrison in a certain hold. Howbeit Thucydides and Sosipater, who were of Maccabees captains, went forth, and slew those that Timotheus had left in the fortress, above 10,000 men. And Maccabeus ranged his army by bands, and set them over the banks, and went against Timotheus, who had about him 120,000 men of foot, and 2,500 horsemen. Now when Timotheus had knowledge of Judah's coming, he sent the women and children and the other baggage unto a fortress called Carnion, for the town was hard to besiege, and uneasy to come unto, by reason of the straitness of all the places. But when Judas his first band came in sight, the enemies, being smitten with fear and terror through the appearing of him who seeth all things, fled amain, one running to this way, another that way, so as that they were often hurt of their own men, and wounded with the points of their own swords. Judas also was very earnest in pursuing them, killing those wicked wretches, of whom he slew about 30,000 men. Moreover, Timotheus himself fell into the hands of Thucydides and Sosipater, whom he besought with much craft to let him go with his life, because he had many of the Jews' parents and the brethren of some of them, who if they put him to death should not be regarded. So when he had assured them with many words that he would restore them without hurt, according to the agreement, they let him go for the saving of their children. of their brethren. Then Maccabees marched forth to Carnion and to the temple of Atargatis, and there he slew 25,000 persons. And after he had put to flight and destroyed them, Judas removed the host toward Ephron, a strong city, wherein Lysias abode, and a great multitude of divers nations, and the strong young men kept the walls, and defended them mightily, wherein also was great provision of engines and darts. But when Judas and his company had called upon Almighty God, who with his power breaketh the strength of his enemies, they won the city, and slew 25,000 of them that were within. From thence they departed to Scythopolis, which lieth 600 furlongs from Jerusalem. But when the Jews that dwelt there had thus defied the Scythopolitans, dealt lovingly with them, and entreated them kindly in the time of their adversity, they gave them thanks, desiring them to be friendly unto them, still unto them, and so they came to Jerusalem, the feast of the weeks approaching. And after the feast, called Pentecost, they went forth against Gorgias the governor of Idumea, who came out with 3,000 men of foot, and 400 horsemen. And it happened that in their fighting together a few of the Jews were slain. At which time Disotius, one of Basanor's company, who was on horseback and a strong man, was still upon Gorgias, and taking hold of his coat threw him by force. And when he would have taken that cursed man alive, a horseman of Tarsia, coming upon him, smote off his shoulder, so that Gorgias fled unto Marissa. Now when they that were with Gorgias had fought long, and were weary, Judas called upon the Lord, that he would shew himself to be their helper and leader of the battle. And with that he began his own language, and sang psalms with a loud voice, and rushing unawares upon Gorgias' men, he put them to flight. So Judas gathered his host, and came into the city of Adullam, and when the seventh day came, they purified themselves as the custom was, and kept the Sabbath in the same place. And upon the day following, as the use had been, Judas and his company came to take up the bodies of them that were slain, and to bury them with their kinsmen in their fathers' graves. Now under the coats of every one that was slain, they found things consecrated to the idols of the Jamnites, which is forbidden the Jews by the law. Then every man saw that this was the cause wherefore they were slain. All men therefore praising the Lord, the righteous judge, who had opened the things that were hid, betook themselves unto prayer, and besought him that the sin committed might wholly be put out of remembrance. Besides that noble Judas exhorted the people to keep themselves from sin, for so much as they saw before their eyes the things that came to pass for the sins of those that were slain. And when he had made a gathering throughout the company to the sum of 2,000 drachms of silver, he sent it to Jerusalem to offer a sin offering, doing therein very well and honestly, in that he was mindful of the resurrection. For if he had not hoped that they that were slain should have risen again, it had been superfluous and vain to pray for the dead. And also in that he perceived that there was a great favor laid up for those that died godly. It was a holy and good thought, whereupon he made a reconciliation for the dead, that they might be delivered from sin. 13. In the 149th year it was told Judas the Antiochus, Eupator, was coming with a great power to Judea, and with him Lysias his protector and ruler of his affairs, having either of them a Grecian power of footmen, 110,000, and horsemen 5,000, and 300, and elephants 22, and 300 chariots armed with hooks. Menelaus also joined himself with them, and with great dissimulation encouraged Antiochus not for the safeguard of the country, but because he thought to have been made governor. But the King of Kings moved Antiochus' mind against this wicked wretch, and Lysias informed the king that this man was the cause of all mischief, so that the king commanded to bring him unto Berea, and to put him to death as the manner is in that place. Now there was in that place a tower of 50 cubits high, full of ashes, and it had a round instrument which on every side hang down into the ashes. And whosoever was condemned of sacrilege or had committed any other grievous crime, there did all men thrust him unto death. Such a death it happened that wicked man to die, not having so much as burial in the earth, and that most justly. For as much as he had committed many sins about the altar, whose fire and ashes were holy, he received his death in ashes. Now the king came with a barbarous and haughty mind to do far worse to the Jews than had been done in his father's time. Which things when Judas perceived, he commanded the multitude to call upon the Lord night and day, that if ever at any other time he would now also help them, being at the point to be put from their law, from their country, and from the holy temple, and that he would not suffer the people that had even now been but a little refreshed to be in subjection to the blasphemous nations. So when they had all done this together and besought the merciful Lord with weeping and fasting, and lying flat upon the ground these 3 days long, Judas, having exhorted them, commanded they should be in a readiness. And Judas, being apart with the elders, determined before the king's host should enter into Judea and get the city, to go forth and try the matter in fight by the help of the Lord. So when he had committed all to the Creator of the world, and exhorted his soldiers to fight manfully, even unto death, for the laws, the temple, the city, the country, and the commonwealth, he camped by Modin. And having given the watchword to them that were about him, victory is of God, with the most valiant and choice young men, he went in into the king's tent by night, and slew in the camp about 4,000 men, and the chiefest of the elephants with all that were upon him. And at last they filled the camp with fear and tumult, and departed with good success. This was done in the break of the day, because the protection of the Lord did help him. Now when the king had taken a taste of the manliness of the Jews, he went about to take the holds by policy, and marched toward Bethsura, which was a stronghold of the Jews. But he was put to flight, failed, and lost of his men. For Judas had conveyed unto them that were in it such things as were necessary. But Rhodocus, who was in the Jews' host, disclosed the secrets to the enemies. Therefore he was sought out, and when they had gotten him, they put him in prison. The king treated with them in Bethsum the second time, gave his hand, took theirs, departed, fought with Judas, was overcome. Heard that Philip, who was left over the affairs in Antioch, was desperately bent, confounded, entreated the Jews, submitted himself, and sware to all equal conditions, agreed with them, and offered sacrifice, honored the temple, and dealt kindly with that place, and accepted well of Maccabeus, made him principal governor from Ptolemais unto the Gerenians. Came to Ptolemais, the people there were grieved for the covenants, for they stormed, because they would make their covenants void. Lysias went up to the judgment seat, said as much as could be in defense of the cause, persuaded, pacified, made them well affected, returned to Antioch. Thus he went touching the king's coming and departing. 14. After 3 years was Judas informed that Demetrius, the son of Seleucus, having entered by the haven of Tripolis with a great power and navy, had taken the country and killed Antiochus and Lysias his protector. Now one Alcimus, who had been high priest, and had defiled himself filthily in the times of their mingling with the Gentiles, seeing that by no means he could save himself, nor have any more access to the holy altar, came to the king Demetrius in 150th year, presenting unto him a crown of gold and a palm, and also the bowls which were used solemnly in the temple, and so that day he held his peace. Howbeit having gotten opportunity to further his foolish enterprise, and being called into council by Demetrius, and asked how the Jews stood affected, and what they intended, he answered thereunto, those of the Jews that he called Assyrians, whose captain is Judas Maccabeus, nourish war and are seditious, and will not let the rest be in peace. Therefore I, being deprived of mine ancestors' honour, I mean the high priesthood, am now come hither. First, verily, for the unfeigned care I have of things pertaining to the king, and secondly, even for that I intend the good of mine own countrymen, for all our nation is in no small misery through the unadvised dealing of them aforesaid. Wherefore, O king, seeing knowest all these things, be careful for the country and our nation, which is pressed on every side, according to the clemency that thou readily shewest unto all. For as long as Judas liveth, it is not possible that the state should be quiet. This was no sooner spoken of him, but others of the king's friends, being maliciously set against Judas, did more incense Demetrius, and forthwith calling Nicanor, who had been master of the elephants, and making him governor over Judea, he sent him forth, commanding him to slay Judas, and to scatter them that were with him, and to make Alcimus high priest of the great temple. Then the heathen that had fled out of Judea from Judas came to Nicanor by flocks, thinking the harm and calamities of the Jews to be their welfare. Now when the Jews heard of Nicanor's coming, and that the heathen were up against them, they cast earth upon their heads, and made supplication to him that had established his people forever, and who always helpeth his portion with manifestation of his presence. So at the commandment of the captain they removed straightways from thence, and came near unto them at the town of Dessau. Now Simon Judas' brother had joined battle with Nicanor, but was somewhat discomfited through the sudden silence of his enemies. Nevertheless Nicanor, hearing of the manliness of them that were with Judas, and the courageousness that they had to fight for their country, durst not try the matter by the sword. Wherefore he sent Posidonius and Theodotus and Mattathias to make peace. So when they had taken long advisement thereupon, and the captain had made the multitude acquainted therewith, and it appeared that they were all of one mind, they consented to the covenants, and appointed a day to meet in together by themselves. And when the day came, and stools were set for either of them, Leudas placed armed men ready in convenient places, lest some treachery should be suddenly practised by the enemies. So they made a peaceable conference. Now Nicanor abode in Jerusalem, and did no hurt, but sent away the people that came flocking unto him. And he would not willingly have Judas out of his sight, for he loved the man from his heart. He prayed him also to take a wife and to beget children. So he married, was quiet, and took part of this life. But Alcimus, perceiving the love that was betwixt them, and considering the covenants that were made, came to Demetrius, and told him that Nicanor was not well affected toward the state, for that he had ordained Judas, a traitor to his realm, to be the king's successor. Then the king, being in a rage, provoked with the accusations of the most wicked man, wrote to Nicanor, signifying that he was much displeased with the covenants, and commanding him that he should send Maccabeus prisoner in all haste unto Antioch. When this came to Nicanor's hearing, he was much confounded in himself, and took it grievously that he should make void the articles which were agreed upon, the man being in no fault. But because there was no dealing against the king, he watched his time to accomplish this thing by policy. Notwithstanding, when Maccabeus saw that Nicanor began to be churlish unto him, And he entreated him more roughly than he was wont, perceiving that such sour behaviour came not of good. He gathered together not a few of his men, and withdrew himself from Nicanor. But the other, knowing that he was notably prevented by Judah's policy, came into the great and holy temple and commanded the priests that were offering their usual sacrifices to deliver him the man. And when they sware that they could not tell where the man was whom he sought, he stretched out his right hand toward the temple, and made an oath in this manner: If you will not deliver me Judas as a prisoner, I will lay this temple of God even with the ground, and I will break down the altar, and erect a notable temple unto Bacchus. After these words he departed. Then the priests lifted up their hands toward heaven, and besought him that was ever a defender of their nation, saying in this manner: Thou, O Lord of all things, who hast need of nothing, wast pleased that the temple of thine habitation should be among us. Therefore now, O holy Lord of all holiness, keep this house ever undefiled, which lately was cleansed, and stop every unrighteous mouth. Now was there accused unto Nicanor one Rhasis, one of the elders of Jerusalem, a lover of his countrymen, and a man of very good report, who for his kindness was called a father of the Jews. For in the former times, when they mingled not themselves with the Gentiles, he had been accused of Judaism, and did boldly jeopard his body and life with all vehemency for the religion of the Jews. So Nicanor, willing to declare that he bare unto the Jews, sent above 500 men of war to take him, for he thought by taking him to do the Jews much hurt. Now when the multitude would have taken the tower, and violently broken into the outer door, and bade that fire should be brought to burn it, he being ready to be taken on every side fell upon his sword, choosing rather to die manfully than to come into the hands of the wicked, to be abused otherwise than beseemed his noble birth. But missing his stroke through haste, the multitude also rushing within the doors, he ran boldly up to the wall, and cast himself down manfully among the thickest of them. But they quickly giving back, and a space being made, he fell down into the midst of the void place. Nevertheless, while there was yet breath within him, being inflamed with anger, he rose up, and though his blood gushed out like spouts of water, and his wounds were grievous, yet he ran through the midst of the throng, and standing upon a steep rock. When as his blood was now quite gone, he plucked out his bowels, and taking them in both his hands, he cast them upon the throng, and calling upon the Lord of life and spirit to restore him those again, he thus died. 15. But Nicanor, hearing that Judas and his company were in the strong places about Samaria, resolved without any danger to set upon them on the Sabbath day. Nevertheless the Jews that were compelled to go with him said, O destroy not so cruelly and barbarously, but give honor to that day, which ye see all things had honored with holiness above all other days. Then the most ungracious wretch demanded if there were mighty one in heaven that had commanded the Sabbath day to be kept. And when they said, There is in heaven a living Lord and mighty, who commanded the seventh day to be kept, then said the other, And I also am mighty upon earth, and I command to take arms, and to do the king's business. Yet he obtained not to have his wicked will done. So Nicanor, in exceeding pride and haughtiness, determined to set up a public monument of his victory over Judas and them that were with him. But Maccabeus had ever sure confidence that the Lord would help him. Wherefore he exhorted his people not to fear the coming of the heathen against them, but to remember the help which in former times they had received from heaven, and now to expect the victory and aid which should come unto them from the Almighty. and so comforting them out of the law and the prophets, and withal putting them in mind of the battles that they won afore, he made them more cheerful. And when he had stirred up their minds, he gave them their charge, shewing them therewithal the falsehood of the heathen, and the breach of odds. Thus he armed every one of them not so much with defence of shields and spears, as with comfortable and good words, and beside that, he told them a dream worthy to be believed, as if it had been so indeed, which did not a little rejoice them. And this was his vision, that Onias, who had been high priest, a virtuous and a good man, reverent in conversation, gentle in condition, well spoken also, and exercised from a child in all points of virtue, holding up his hands, prayed for the whole body of the Jews. This done in like manner, there appeared a man with grey hairs, and exceeding glorious, who was of a wonderful and excellent majesty. Then Onias answered, saying, This is a lover of the brethren, who prayed much for the people, and for the holy city, to wit Jeremias the prophet of God. Whereupon Jeremias, holding forth his right hand, gave to Judas a sword of gold, and in giving it spake thus, Take this holy sword, a gift from God, with the which thou shalt wound the adversaries. Thus, being well comforted by the words of Judas, which were very good, and able to stir them up to valour, and to encourage the hearts of the young men, they determined not to pitch camp, but courageously to set upon them, and manfully to try the matter by conflict, because the city and the sanctuary and the temple were in danger. For the care that they took for their wives, and their children, their brethren, and folks, was in least account with them, but the greatest and principal fear was for the holy temple. Also they that were in the city took not the least care, being troubled for the conflict abroad. And now when us all looked what should be the trial, and the enemies were already come near, and the army was set in array, and the beasts conveniently placed, and the horsemen set in wings. Maccabeus, seeing the coming of the multitude and the divers preparations of armor, and the fierceness of the beast, stretched out his hands toward heaven, and called upon the Lord that worketh wonders, knowing that victory cometh not by arms, but even as it seemeth good to him who giveth it to such as are worthy. Therefore in his prayer he said after this manner, O Lord, thou didst send thine angel in the time of Ezekias king of Judea, and did slay in the host of Sennacherib 185,000. Wherefore now also, O Lord of heaven, send a good angel before us for fear and dread unto them, and through the might of thine arm let those be stricken with terror that come against thy holy people to blaspheme. And he ended thus. Then Nicanor and they that were with him came forward with trumpets and songs, but Judas and his company encountered their enemies with invocation and prayer. So that fighting with their hands and praying unto God with their hearts, they slew no less than 35,000 men. For through the appearance of God they were greatly cheered. Now when the battle was done, returning again with joy, they knew that Nicanor lay dead in his harness. Then they made a great shout and a noise, praising the Almighty in their own language. And Judas, who was ever the chief defender of the citizens both in body and mind, and who continued his love toward his countrymen all his life, commanded to strike off Nicanor's head and his hand with his shoulder, and bring them to Jerusalem. So when he was there, and called them of his nation together, and set the priests before the altar, he sent for them that were of the tower, and shewed them vile Nicanor's head, and the hand of that blasphemer, which with proud brags he had stretched out against the holy temple of the Almighty. And when he had cut out the tongue of the ungodly Nicanor, he commanded that they should give it by pieces unto the fowls, and hang up the reward of his madness before the temple. So every man praised toward the heaven the glorious Lord, saying, Blessed be he that hath kept his own place undefiled. He hanged also Nicanor's head upon the tower, an evident and manifest sign unto all of the help of the Lord. And they ordained all with a common decree, in no case to let that day pass without solemnity, but to celebrate the 30th day of the 12th month, which in Syrian tongue is called Adar, the day before Mardochio's day, thus when it with Nicanor. And from that time forth the Hebrews had the city in their power. And here will I make an end. And if I have done well and is fitting the story, it is that which I desired. But if slenderly and meanly, it is that which I could attain to. For as it is hurtful to drink wine or water alone, and as wine mingled with water is pleasant, and delighted the taste, even so speechly finely framed delighted the ears of them that read the story, and here shall be an end.